Welcome to the FARcast here at Chadron State College. I'm Daniel Binkard with my co-host, as always, Alex Helmbrecht, and we're here with George Ledbetter, who I can't believe we haven't had you on the show before. Man of many talents, a fixture in the Chadron community, and we've got him. It's great.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, George, we'll get right into some questions for you. So just reading through the notes that Alex compiled, I couldn't believe, I thought I knew that you'd done a little bit, you'd been here and there, but I had no idea you've been all over the place.
Well, I traveled the world for several years, actually. I was fortunate enough to take extended trips in India and turn that into a bit of a career as a business person for a while before I got into the business of newspapers, and then was in the newspaper business in Deadwood, South Dakota for several years, and then came down to Chadron and did the same thing here. So interspersed with beekeeping and tour guiding, I have had a few experiences over the years.
This is important if I have beekeeping questions, because you never know when you're going to need to know
Well, the first thing to know about bees is they sting.
That's good to know. Absolutely. Well, and I'm sure we'll touch on bits and pieces of all these careers as we talk about all this stuff. But if you were to pick one item from your life, what's a standout experience that you've had that would define who you are now?
I think that would have to be the time that I spent in Rishikesh in India, living with a traditional Hindu guru on the banks of the Ganges River in his little primitive ashram, which essentially was a mud hut with a tin roof on it and a small garden right on the banks of the Ganges, right by a place where people's bodies were burned, a burning ghat.
Wow.
I was there for several years, off and on, probably a total of maybe 5 years, about 2 years the first time there, and then back and forth. I spent many more months. And through that, I did learn to speak Hindi language. My guru didn't really speak English. Most of the people I was living with didn't, so it was a total immersion course in that. And total immersion in Hinduism and a whole different way of life. That very beautiful, peaceful time, an introduction to yoga, and I'd had an interest in philosophy before, but I didn't really want to study academic philosophy, and this was living philosophy. So that's an experience that certainly altered what I have become, I have to say.
Oh, I imagine so. I mean, I imagine so. I can't imagine that. I have not been in any kind of situation like that.
And I really can't explain very well what it's like. And that way of life, I think, is gone away even in India now through the forces of modernization over the last 40 years. But some of the things that we were doing struck me as having been traditions that were predating, they were thousands of years old. The making of chapati. We made every meal fresh on a wood fire, for instance, and the bread is made by kneading the flour. It's just salt and flour and water, and then you pat it out by hand and cook it on a metal plate and on an open fire. And vegetarian diet entirely. Not a lot of philosophy in an academic sense, but much storytelling, the myths and stories of the Indian religion, and then just watching the guru and his chelas, his disciples, interact with other people, and the sacredness of the fire that we cooked on, and there are just so many aspects of it that it's really hard to define and hard to give a picture of that to people who have not experienced it at all.
Well, I mean, I kind of think what was it like day to day being there?
So first thing, one of the reasons that they liked me there was that I've always liked to get up early in the morning, and they consider early rising to be kind of a virtue. Of course, in the tropics, it's really good because that's the cool time. But I would wake automatically at about 4 in the morning and get up and go down into the Ganges for a bath. Now, the Ganges right there is a cold mountain stream. It's just coming out of the Himalayas. So that was a pretty invigorating dip.
And at 4 in the morning.
At 4 in the morning. But that endeared them. That made me look like really one of these sadhus, one of these mendicant Indian guys. And then we go up and have a cup of hot chai that was made over the over the fire there and sit and chat for a while, and then
I've had some of George's chai before, Daniel, and it is the best.
I want to try some.
I'll put in a plug for that.
Yeah. And then the day was really occupied. A lot of it was with paying attention to the food that you eat. So we had a little garden. He had a small farm. We would work that a little bit. He actually made his living, got a little bit of income by growing mint on the side of the road, or the side of the Ganges on the right near the shore. And each morning then you go down and cut the mint and carry it on his back into the bazaar and walk around the streets of the town selling these little bundles of mint for 15 paisa, which was the equivalent of maybe a penny or something. So he was known as Mint Baba in the town.
Okay.
But so that occupied the time, and then we would prepare the noon meal, and then there would be a nap in the afternoon because it's hot time of day, so it was pretty much mandatory, a couple hours, and then you'd wake up about 4 in the afternoon and start the cycle again, have another cup of chai, and then get busy preparing the food for the evening meal. And it was pretty idyllic, really, in many ways. It was just a calm, quiet life.
Did you find a lot of, I mean, obviously it sounds like a really pastoral setting and certainly serene, but did you find a lot of peace with that intentionality where every day you wake up at a certain time and you get into these routines and you really put a focus on the things that are important, your health, your mental and physical wellness, and then obviously your nutrition, and it basically, and obviously camaraderie.
Right.
Otherwise, that was your day.
The one interesting thing, though, you mentioned the feeling of peace and all of that, and this is one of the real contrasts there. Although you think of a Hindu guru as being a calm, peaceful person, my guru was very fiery. And he did not hesitate to argue and shout, and he was very profane, actually. Yeah. And it took me a long time to understand Hindu profanity. But I saw him get his last tooth knocked out in a fist fight.
Oh, boy.
He had accosted a guy who he thought was stealing the calf. We had cows at one time there, and he thought the guy had tried to steal his cow. And he went and accosted him, and the guy knocked his last tooth out. That guy got jumped by the rest of the disciples, though, and came to regret that.
I would imagine.
So there's more to it than the calm and peaceful aspect, which was really, it's important to understand that even in the midst of this serene lifestyle, there is a contrast there, and it's not, life is not always peaceful, and so you have to stand up for things sometimes. Okay. So. Another time that he got angry and got in a fight was the Ganges is a sacred river, and you're not supposed to fish there, but somebody came along and threw a bomb into the Ganges to kill the fish there. He went down and jumped that guy, too.
I'd like to meet this guy. So George, you grew up in South Dakota, right?
I did, yeah. I'm from Pierre.
How does a boy from Pierre, South Dakota, wind up in India? I mean, is it as simple as you saw a group of people hanging around this river and you walked up and said, hey, can I?
Not quite like that.
Yeah.
So I had gone to the University of Denver for college and was studying philosophy. And as I said, I decided academic philosophy wasn't really an interest. I had an opportunity to go visit. There was my girlfriend at the time had gone to Berlin in Germany. So I took a year off from college. Thought it was going to be a year off, took a leave of absence, and went to Germany and got a job there working for the U.S. military post-exchange system for a few months, and then quit that and traveled around and came back, and a guy that I had met there had been in India before, and he said, hey, we're going to India. You want to go along? Well, I had spent all the money I had, so I wrote my parents and said, will you send me $100? I want to go to India. And they sent me $150, and I didn't come back for 3 years. But the encounter with the guru happened by chance. One of the places that tourists, this was the hippie trail to India in the 1960s, 1971. One of the places that you often visited was Rishikesh. It was famous then because the Beatles had gone there to meet with Guru Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And so I went up there and by chance encountered this guru Some friends had gone down to his place and stayed, and that's another different story. But at that point, I was really broke, and a couple of guys, other Westerners and myself, went up across the river, across the Ganges, and we stayed in a cave, lived in a cave for about a month there. And this cave was a place where Indian sadhus and mendicants and philosophers had been probably staying for eons at different time period. It was the most idyllic place you can imagine. We didn't have much money. We had a young fellow with us, an Indian sadhu who knew how to make your money stretch. So we'd go down to the bazaar, buy a little bit of lentils and some wheat flour and make our meals there. And during that time, I had experimented a little bit with meditation before, but there it became a completely natural thing that you just felt this serenity, this whole atmosphere there. And during that time then, I kept reflecting on this guru because I had met him before and somehow there was some connection established. And when I got back down then, went back into the village and met up, but found out he had been asking about me too. And so I said, hey, can I stay there? And, oh, sure, that's fine. Yeah, you can become part of the group. And so I did. That's kind of a long story, but
it's really fascinating. Your college spring break was very different than mine.
Yeah, you never know where you're going to end up. Well, let's see. I have a question about what locations would you recommend for potential world travelers? But, even beyond locations, what advice do you have for potential world travelers?
Oh, yeah, great question.
So the advice would be open to every experience and open to every person. I firmly believe through all of my life experiences that one can learn something from everyone that you encounter. But you got to be open to it. Yeah. And that may be a person that you disagree with on every respect, but they've got something to teach you. That's why you run into them. Mm-hmm. So you have to be open to things. I mean, if I hadn't been open to this encounter with this guru, none of this would have happened probably. If I hadn't been open to this friend who on a whim said, well, I'm going to India. Do you want to go along? And I know I'll have a lot of friends there. And so I said, sure, that sounds like fun. So that would be my advice, is to be aware of your surroundings, but be open to the things that life opens up for you. As far as a place to go, I would say India, certainly. Yeah. But that's from my own personal experience. India is a incredibly diverse country, and there's so much to learn there. And it's become a lot newer and more modern than it was when I was there, with cell phones and proliferation of that and television and internet. But I think there's still parts of traditional India there to be explored if people want to go and look for them.
I think you kind of hinted at another great piece of advice, but this would be for those who are parents in the audience, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but it was your parents had to trust you that you were going to do the right thing, and for them to triple or not, well, I guess double the amount of money that they were going to send to you, and then trust that you're going to make the right decisions, had to have been just a tremendous decision.
I was so fortunate with my parents. I thought, so when I started that trip to Germany, I did all this on a shoestring, as you understand. So I actually hitchhiked from Pier to New York City to catch an Icelandic Air flight to Europe, to Luxembourg. That was the cheapest way to go. My mother saw me off on the highway with my hitchhiking sign that said New York City and my backpack on my back, and she took me out to the road to do that. And I just think, what a heart that was to do that for your child.
Yeah, that's special because you get to that point where you have to let that person be that person.
Be that person.
And that's great.
Yeah.
So George, Daniel talked a little bit about it. And I'll say this so I get most of your professions in there, but you spent time as a reporter, editor, and publisher for newspapers in both Deadwood and Chadron. So what did you learn? And then give us your thoughts on the news industry, both maybe when you were working in it and then maybe how it is now or how you perceive it.
So, the thing that I learned about newspapers, I worked on community newspapers, which are small weekly newspapers. And my belief is that community newspapers are really important for a community.
Oh, absolutely.
A weekly newspaper. They used to be dailies. Now you can't quite make that work. But providing local news, honest, impartial reporting of local happenings is really important, and it's something that I'm very concerned is going the way of the dinosaur. In some respects, there's certainly the news will be out there, but it may not be in that unified form. But that's what I really liked about newspaper business, was being part of the community, being able to tell the stories of people in the community, particularly reporting on their government, because government is not some abstract concept in our country. Government is you and I, and we have to know what government is doing in order to make decisions and judgments about how it should go, and that's what a community newspaper should be about. What's happened now with the gutting of the newspaper business is really sad. I don't think it's going to go away. I just hope that there's a model that will support impartial, independent reporting on a community as well as a regional and national level. The internet, during my time period, I was actually pretty fortunate. I started, part of why it was really fun being an editor in Deadwood, I started just about the time that gambling came into Deadwood. So over the 12 years I was there, I got to watch how that community was transformed by this new industry and report on it and tell the people in the community what was happening on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. The first week I was reporting, there was a murder in a casino, which was a heck of a way to break into being a reporter on a small weekly newspaper. It happened right across the street from the place where our office was. But you have to acknowledge that. I mean, you bring a new industry into town, especially one like that, hey, that's part of it, They didn't like it when I reported about the increased incidence of bad checks in the county. That didn't sit well with the people, but that was a fact of life. That's part of what happened. So those are the things that were important to me in a news business. I think that'll still get out, but I don't know the platforms that we have now if they're going to be as useful as a community newspaper that everybody had access to and could read in common. So,
that fragmentation.
The fragmentation that's happened. Yeah. But at the time, newspapers were doing quite well. And the local newspaper, the internet actually was a boon for our local newspapers. So Deadwood News was making it onto the internet then. And some of the stories that I wrote got picked up by larger news outlets, or at least the ideas that I was working on were picked up. So the internet provides a lot more information for us in some ways, but that information is not curated. That's what an editor has to do, is decide what the news is, what's important about the news, and how to present it in a way that people can understand it. Yeah. Chadron State College is doing a great job of educating community newspaper people, I think. And I see what Michael Kennedy's done, and I certainly admire what Levita Dickinson did here with the newspaper and the careers that Chadron State grads have had in the news business. It's really inspiring to me. Yeah, I think you actually, one of the things we didn't mention is your job is that you write a lot for the college as kind of a stringer reporter, and then also for the foundation and the alumni office. So a lot of your stories appear in the alumni magazine. But you wrote a great piece about the centennial of the Eagle and just the impact that those advisors had. It's really I think it's one of those things. It's easy to see the tangible output that those students have, because both Daniel and I are involved with the Eagle. Our friend Justin Haig, so many others who go on to not necessarily bits and pieces of journalism, but they certainly use that background to assist them in their professional Exactly.
career.
You learn all of those things that you need to know to evaluate, to make decisions, to make good judgments about things, and to pass that knowledge on to others. That's a big part of journalism.
Yeah, that sure is.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I'm up. I lose track. Thinking about the newspapers, but let's shift gears, talk about the great outdoors. I know one of your favorite subjects, and I think I mentioned it about at least once a podcast how much I enjoy getting out and hiking around the local parks. So let's. You spend a lot of time on bike trails and cross country skiing, which is a little different from what I do with just hiking. But what What's involved with all that? I mean, especially the cross-country skiing.
Well, so I learned early on that exercise, getting good physical exercise, is really important for mental health. I noticed that even back when I went to college. I found that if I wasn't getting exercise, I just didn't feel quite right. And so I started bicycling actually. Well, I came back from India the first time, and my dad had bought a bike for me. It was a kind of a road bike, and I got on and really enjoyed just riding around Pier, and then went out to the Black Hills and started riding the trails there, and finding how you could get into nature and have that good exercise at the same time. And cross-country skiing then I learned in the Black Hills after I moved out there from a friend, and that's a good way in the wintertime when the bike doesn't work so well. So that's a good way to get out and deep breathe and see the whole different aspect of nature that you don't see during the summer or any other time of year. It changes, but it's really, really beautiful. So the cross-country skiing is just a nice, fun way. It's so smooth and gentle to get out there and quiet, and you experience the outdoors at a time when it's a different sense than it is in the summertime. It's quiet, it's still alive, but a different way. It's really fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Daniel, you have to be careful when you're riding bike with George because he goes faster than you.
I'll bet you do.
I was riding with him once on the Mickelson Trail, and he was, I don't know, I was carrying my son in the cart behind, and George was probably going, I don't know, 15, 17 miles an hour or whatever. But he is yelling back, look at the bird, look at the bird. And I was like, what bird? So even when he's going fast, he's observing all that stuff out
but
there.
that's the fun. That's one of the most fun part. Some of the most memorable experiences are the wildlife that you encounter.
Yeah.
One of the times that I still reflect on how special it was, Elizabeth, my wife, and I were out riding in the Black Hills, and we chanced to be in the middle of a herd of elk, cows, and calves. And they were calling to each other, just like cattle do, with these beautiful plaintive calls. They sound like you hear the recordings of dolphins or whales, and it sounded like that, but they were calling back and forth to each other in the forest. And we stood there motionless, and the calves started coming up to us because they were curious about who we were, what we were doing there. So we just didn't move and just stood there. And a couple of times they kind of did little mock charges to see if we would move. And we just stood there, and mindful, of course, that being between a mama elk and a young is probably not the best thing. But eventually they just accepted us and walked, not 10 feet away from us, walked past. But just the experience of being in the middle of that and hearing that and feeling that sense, that's just the kind of fun thing that happens when you're out in the outdoors.
That is fantastic.
I have not, however, seen a mountain lion while I'm out on the trails.
I haven't either. I hear stories out at like the Black Hills Overlook that people have seen them out there occasionally. I've run into a rattlesnake out there.
Yeah,
that's about as bad as it's gotten.
Yeah, watch coyotes and fox, and we saw a weasel here just this last week when we were up at our place in the hills there. And another one that an encounter. It's really hard to describe, but riding on the Mickelson Trail on occasion, you'll have butterflies that will fly. It seems like they're flying right along with you, like they're guiding you as you're riding, which is just so magical.
Yeah.
And this will happen for, you've experienced it, I think. This will happen for, seem like minutes at a time. This butterfly will stay right ahead of you as though it's leading you down the trail.
Yeah, it's a pretty magical place. Like
it
you
really
said.
is.
So George, I know that you're certainly involved with the local travel board. I used to be on that as well. I had a lot of great times with you there, and the others. But then you're also involved with the Northwest Nebraska Trails Association. Can you tell us a little bit about what projects you have going on now, and also why is it important for people in our neck of the woods to be involved with groups like this?
Well, as I said about community newspapers, I think community involvement. A community is you and I and everybody else that's here, and it only becomes better if we try to make it better. So the involvement with the travel board is because I think that tourism, I'm a traveler myself, and I think tourism is a good way to not only provide economic development for a community, but to enhance a community's entire life. You bring people in that bring in different attitudes and ideas and things that you might not have heard of. So as far as being on the travel board, I'm just trying to help Chadron develop its travel industry because I think we have great potential for that here.
And it's already a big economic driver.
It is. It's the second largest economic driver in the county, second only to agriculture, and going to get bigger. I'm convinced of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have so many beautiful things here. The historical attractions that we have here. As I mentioned, I was a tour guide for a while too, and brought people down to this area. My first encounter with the Museum of the Fur Trade was guiding a tour, and I stopped in not knowing anything about it and was absolutely overwhelmed by the wealth of things that are in the Museum of the Fur Trade and the history that represents from this area. But the big project now, Alex, that I'm working on, and along with a number of other people, is the Northwest Nebraska Trails Association. We're trying to develop the mountain bike trails and this area, and particularly want to bring a connection for the Cowboy Trail into Chadron. So the Cowboy Trail is going to be the longest single component of the Great American Rail Trail. It's a former railroad converted into a pedestrian and bicycle trail across the country. It ends about 4 miles outside of Chadron. Nebraska Game and Parks is committed to, at some time, finishing the part from Rushville into Chadron, and I think they probably will in the next couple of years. But there's a 5-mile gap there. And fortunately for Chadron, the Nebraska Northwestern Railroad has agreed to allow construction of a rail with trail right alongside their railroad. So the NNTA, of which I'm a member, has committed to getting that trail developed. Now, it's a little bit difficult. There's going to be a couple of big streams that we have to cross, and it's going to be not cheap to do that. But by making that connection, we're going to connect Chadron, as it was via the railroad. We're going to be connected with all the rest of the world through that link of a rail trail. So Chadron was founded as a railroad town in 1885, and I think that rail line that was built there is going to be part of Chadron's future economic development, too, as a non-motorized trail.
So George, I think Daniel and I understand the benefit of trails and recreation like that, but for someone who may need a little convincing, what do you say? They see a trail, oh, cool, you can walk on it. But what does a trail actually provide? What does that do for the communities and the people of those communities?
Well, there's so many different ways to look at it. Just for the people in the community, the trail is access to a safe, pleasurable place where they can get a little bit of physical exercise. And for many people, just a walk is a fine form of physical exercise. Mm-hmm. Being able to walk on an area where you are away from traffic is really special. Chadron has a problem that our sidewalks are not very adequate, so when you go for a walk and you see people around, unfortunately we have to walk in the streets, and that is not really safe. If we get this trail built, then you won't have to walk in the streets. So we have cross-country teams. Both the high school and the college have cross-country teams. They need a place to train. They're already running alongside that active railroad as a training ground, just informally. But if we can make that a proper not paved, but a packed trail, it'll be a lot easier for them and a lot safer. The railroad people will be a lot happier about it. And again, they have a safe place away from traffic. They aren't breathing smoke or exhaust fumes when they're doing it. So that's one thing is in terms of community wellness and community well-being. Parks and trails are really important. In terms of economic development, I come back from a trip this summer to the West Coast, and we stopped and explored bicycle trails everywhere we went, and I saw people of all ages enjoying bicycle trails. And many of them were probably local people just riding on the local trail that they had. And some of the places were rail trails, some of them were dedicated mountain bike trails. But I also saw a lot of people coming in from far distant places just to explore those trails. we rode the route of the Hiawatha, which is a 17-mile trail on the old Milwaukee Road. Beautiful, beautiful route with high trestles and a 2-mile-long tunnel and incredibly picturesque. They have a shuttle system, so you can rent a bike at the top and ride down to the bottom and then take a shuttle back up. That was
works.
so packed with people. There were just hundreds of people on the day we were there. And every day of the summer, they get all kinds of people coming in just to enjoy that trail. So think of the boon that is for all of those people to enjoy that outdoor experience, and for the local economy that they come into and they bring in with their need for food and lodging and all of the other things that go with it being a traveler. So those are a couple of the things that I see that trails bring.
Yeah, not even to mention the stretch from Rushville to here would be arguably the most gorgeous stretch of the Cowboy Trail.
I think it will, really, because we have the most scenery. It's really flat on most of the rest of it. I think the part through the Sandhills, that's going to be the hardest part to build, from Gordon over to Valentine. It also has its own beauty, but that's going to be for the really dedicated bicyclist, because you've got about 90 miles and there's nothing in between.
Some great sunsets and sunrises.
Great sunsets,
You
yes.
have those to look forward to.
And a lot of birds. There'll be a lot of wildlife to view on that
So
section of
if
trail.
someone wanted to get involved who's listening with the NNTA, how could they go about doing that?
Well, we have a website. It's discovernorthwestnebraskatrails.com, and they could certainly contact us through that, and we would be very happy to have members or even just interested parties. We do need help. We're trying to organize trail improvement days where we go out and work on trails. We'd like to develop a dedicated mountain bike trail at Chadron State Park. Nebraska Game and Parks is working with us on that idea. And just get out and enjoy the bike trails.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've kind of hit on a lot of them, but any other interests or hobbies of note that you'd like to share?
I think you covered most of them there. I've become quite interested now. My interest in bicycles has expanded to bicycle work, and I've become really interested in the history and mechanics of bicycles.
Yeah.
And I only just learned that of a new type of bicycle that someone has developed, an electric bicycle that actually is direct power generation. So you just pedal, and that delivers power right to your back wheel or into a battery if you're excess powering. But the interesting thing I learned from that is that is still less efficient than a chain-driven bicycle. That a chain-driven bicycle is the most efficient way of converting power from your legs into motion.
Yeah. Wasn't there? I'm having this recollection of like a movement study where the efficiency of a human and how on our legs is one thing, and that's pretty efficient, but then you put us on a bicycle and we're 10 times or more efficient, just being able to get that easy movement. Yeah.
And move through space and
Yeah.
even riding around towns. Another thing I enjoy is just riding around urban areas and observing the things that you find there. So, that's another aspect of trail building here, is building bicycle trails, dedicated bicycle routes inside of Chadron.
Yeah.
Chadron State College has got beautiful trails. The Sea Hill trails are really fun to ride, to walk. And you can see wildlife there. There's a den of fox up there that they're really fun to watch, the kit fox there. And you see the birds up there too. And so it's a wealth of things here that there are to admire and enjoy.
Yeah, it's so nice having it, in the backyard of the office or the backyard of the town.
Of the whole
It's
town.
Great.
Yeah, sure. All right, George, we've reached that part of the interview where we have some quick hitting questions. So first thing that comes to the top of your head. So George, what was the first concert you attended?
So the first concert I attended, you may not believe this, but I still remember when I was in junior high, Buck Owens played in the auditorium of the Pier High School. And I remember that concert.
Nice.
Yeah. But the first concert in maybe more contemporary was actually when I went to University of Denver. The introductory concert that we had as freshmen was Taj Mahal. blues, and I've
All
always
right.
liked blues music ever since then.
That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we got kind of an abstract question for you. Who, what, where, when, why, how? Which of those conjures up your best memories of the news business?
So my best memories of the news business are being in the office of the newspaper in Deadwood, which was in the Federal Building. So it was a beautiful, beautiful building there, and working on stories about, believe it or not, local government.
Yeah.
And the county commission and the planning and zoning commission and the historic preservation commission, and coming to understand how local government works and the mechanics of it and the people involved in it and how that makes our society function.
Oh, great answer. George, what's a favorite biking trail of yours?
I have to say that the Mickelson Trail in the Black Hills in a rail trail is probably my favorite. But in terms of an outdoor trail, the Spotted Tail Trail, the trail, the Spotted Tail Trail in National Forest, Nebraska National Forest, is really a beautiful trail. And Strong Canyon actually is probably better than Spotted Tail. So the Strong Canyon Trail, it starts right across from Chadron State Park, and there's a couple different ways to do it, but you see beautiful, nice little valley, and you go up to the top and you look across to Crow Peak and Crow Butte and all of those things. And so that's a beautiful mountain bike trail if you want to go on one.
Oh, that'd be great.
I haven't ridden out there, but I've hiked it, and it's nice.
It's a nice trail, yeah. Little strenuous in parts.
Yes, especially when you're carrying a toddler.
Right.
Of course. So similar vein, a favorite cross-country skiing location?
For that, I have to say that the Eagle Cliff trails in the northern Black Hills, just outside of Spearfish Canyon, the network up there is great. In this local area here, the Chadron Creek Wildlife Management Area, there are 3 or 4 ways that you can ski that, and that is really fun too. And that's one of the places that I think the mountain lions have been looking at me when I was skiing up there.
Yeah. There they are.
Need to maybe take them some skis. So
Yeah.
they can chase you down. George, last one. What is the word that comes to your head when you think of Chadron State?
So this one's a little tough, but I think surprising, because before I moved to Chadron, I knew there was a college here, but I was really surprised at what a wonderful institution it is and how many great people there are here and how many exceptional people have received their training here. And thanks to the work that I've done for the college and the foundation, I've gotten to interview some of them and find out about their experiences and find out about people that have worked here over the years and the accomplishments that they've had, Nobel Prize winning and noted artists and people that are at the top of their profession. And it's surprising to come out of remote, rural, northwest Nebraska, an institution that is so wonderful and has produced so many fine outcomes for so many people.
Yeah, very good.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, George. We sincerely thank you for joining us, and you've had a very interesting life, and here's to many more years for you.
And it's still interesting. Keeps loving it. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, George.